Cecily is going to talk to us about looking into the future, trying to figure out and know what's going to change, what's not going to change, and then what's next. And I was thinking about that in coming today. And really, that's what we're all trying to do, because we're trying to figure out what our customers are going to do, what the economy is going to do, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think the concept of trying to figure out what's going to happen in the future is a fascinating one. Cecily has just released a book, which I'm sure she'll tell you about. She's a fabulous speaker. I've seen her. I think you're really going to enjoy today. And when I talked to her about speaking, I specifically picked January with the idea of, hey, we're all looking forward, it's the new year and stuff like that. So please give a warm welcome to Cecily Sommers.
My first profession, I'm on my third, was as a dancer. So I have it's ingrained in me to kind of hide backstage and come on. So forgive me for not circulating with you on the front end, but I hope for those of you who can stay, I do enjoy very much talking with you one-on-one. It's just I'm doing that. So I know that it's worth my time anyway to speak with you, because I came and checked out Club Entrepreneur last time. Wanted to get a sense of who was in the room and how it goes. And, you know, every group is different. And you never really know. And I have to say that if Rick claims success by having people come together and learn a few things over lunch and go back to work thinking differently, I think the other note of success is who's in the room. So I'm really pleased that you're here. Thank you for coming. And I also want to just follow up on his note about participating in Pechakucha, which is a lot of fun. A lot of fun. You have 6 seconds per slide. Say it, say it, say it, right on message. Today, I'm going to do the complete opposite. I'm going to take you on a really long road, a very, very, very thorough discussion. It's futurist bouillon, all boiled down into an hour. And I'm going to give it all to you, first by letting you know that, in fact, I do wear the title of professional futurist. And that means that I know what you're thinking. And your thoughts probably go something like this: what the hell is a futurist? I get that question more or less from my mother every time I see her. And I've been doing this for more than 13 years. So I understand that it's hard to peg down, and that's because that's the nature of the work. Futurists, we spend our time in the space between and in the unknowable, the space between present and future. And it is very tricky, so that even for someone like my unconventional mother, who is a kind of groovy octogenarian artist, still making work and showing it, she still trips on coming up with a conventional answer when people ask her, what does your daughter do? So you can imagine her consternation when she asks, people are asking, what is a futurist? What does she do? Or the one that makes me laugh, how many of them are there? This is a very serious question for her. She thinks it's a fascinating question. I said, I can't answer that. But I'm on my mission to create many, many more. So that is a part of what today is all about. So if I back up for a moment and share with you what a futurist does, so we can unpack that a little bit today. Really, what we're doing is we're looking at how change occurs from a really big meta level. I like to say that as a futurist, what I really am is a zoomologist. It's about getting the largest perspective on change as possible, and then zooming in and getting all the fine detail about the experience, up close, personal, emotional, intuitive, so that you can engineer what's coming in the future from a large context with a very distinct set of needs, and that process is strategy, how you make up the gap is innovation, and the practice is foresight. So zoomologists is what you're going to be. That means you have to take a lot of things into consideration. When we're talking about creating change and leading change, there are 3 things that you have to really take a systems view of. And the first is, how do conditions change in the world? I have a model for scanning change that I'll share with you called the 4 forces of change that are predictable. Their outcomes are not, however, because what we choose to do with them and how events come to pass is something that we want to watch for. The other agent of change is in the human domain, and that is the element of choice. So if we understand how we perceive change, how we make decisions, how we generate insights, and then how we marshal that effectively over time in the face of really daunting, crushing demands and the busy schedules that I know all of you have. That's the biggest problem that I think has to be addressed on a daily basis, is how do you keep up with all of the emails and phone calls and meetings and emails and phone calls and meetings that fill up your schedule when the job is to make sure that all of those activities actually are aligned with a future, aligned with a vision that is worth doing. So the human domain, understanding how we process information, is a really, really important piece of this, because that tells us what our methodology needs to be. And then the final agency is in the organization in which you live and work, whether it be your own business or someone else's. Understanding the systems by which you enforce and enact and inspire change is really important. All 3 of those come together when we are looking at a commitment to anticipate what comes and be proactive in our strategy and innovation. 3 talks in 1, how about that? We're going to take a look at those by plunging into the future. So enjoy your meal, relax as we take a trip into an underwater hotel where you can imagine you might be coming in after a long day on the road, and you bring your computers and all of your devices with you. You're hungry, you're famished after a long day, and you think, oh, what do I want for dinner? Let me see. I think I'll have broccoli rabe, filet mignon, and maybe apple pie for dessert. So as you go to take your shower, you just go to the Fab Hub that sits next to your bed and press the button. And while you're showering, your meal is being printed out from that 3D fabricator. That's what dinner might look like in this scenario. After you've had a bite to eat, you check your messages. These messages appear on the glass walls of your hotel room, where you might be sleeping with the fishes that evening. And you get a message from a friend of yours who happens to be in Madagascar, and she says, check this out. Just saw one of those crazy Madagascar cockroaches. And so you think, I wouldn't mind a little bit of entertainment tonight. I'll make one too. I can go back to this Fab Hub that is sitting right here in my room, because that's just one of the things that every room now has. And I'll make one too. But you put a twist on it. You add a little mohawk, a faux mohawk. You also program in that it's going to sing to you under the sea, and that this is your entertainment for the evening. Now, this type of scene is derived from information and research that exists right now. We are able to print out meat and tissue right now. There are hotels that exist under the water right now in the Maldives. We have the capabilities to do all these things. So much of what a futurist does is to take that information, weak signals and emerging ideas, technologies, markets, and begin to intersect it with what are your interests? What is your agenda? What might you create in a future that looks like that? So that's the thinking you want to access in the process. And it's an imaginative one. It's very much a right-brained one. And that's a piece of what we'll be talking about, is how you integrate that into a world that has you task-oriented all the time, right? How do you fit that in? We're going to begin now by chunking that down and saying, all right, so that first piece that we need to know in the construct is about how conditions change. And as I mentioned, there are 4 predictable forces that motivate change in our environment, always have, always will. They will not change. And they are resources, technology, demographics, and governance. The future is calling. So one of the things that I wanted to do for you here was to make a distinction between the forces, the structural forces of change, and trends. This is an important distinction. Trends are what occur on the surface as a result of these structural changes below. So we understand what people care about and how they're beginning to integrate change by the choices they make in the marketplace, by their preferences, by how they begin to reorganize their family life and their social life. We call those trends. But the things that motivate those trends are these 4 forces. They are the 4 forces, the 4 pillars of every society. We can take a look at maybe the simplest view of what any human grouping looks like and say that even in, let's say, a Neanderthal clan, what you have is people coming together to work together because you can do more cooperatively than you can alone, of course. And what you do is you look at what are the raw materials, what does the environment have to offer that you will create your sustenance from, the earth, the water, the vegetation, the living animals, how all of that changes. Next, you take a look at what are the tools that you have to extract value from raw materials and then create new products, secondary value. Tools and knowledge sets are what we call technology. As resources change, typically people migrate, but they also invent new tools and methods to accommodate that, a second force. The third force is demographics. Who's there matters a lot. You need to have a distribution of gender and of age and of skill levels and backgrounds and some diversity among it as well. For that group to remain stable and productive, this is really an economic unit. People come together as an economic unit. How do you sustain that productivity and grow on it? Demographics, who's in the mix matters a lot. And then finally, you've got to manage that. You have to come up with rules of law and rules of the market. You've come together to create value. Now, who gets what? How does that go? What's in, what's out? And that's what we do, is through governance. We do that with rules of law and markets. And this is the most reactive form of the 4 forces. When we have issues coming up from the bottom and we have new capabilities emerge, like stem cell research, for instance, we take it into the governance realm and we say, well, that's not okay, or maybe that's exciting. And we duke it out for a while as in terms of what regulation might be and what markets might bring to the fore. Certainly that markets have been what have pushed our consciousness around sustainability and all of that, which we call a trend, but in fact it is a long-term change because of what's happening in resources, technology, and demographics, right? So I thought I would share with you as an example of how this moves rather quickly. This is a scene from the 1930s at the Minneapolis Grain Exchange building. Farmers came together from rural areas of the state and said, hey, we want to make sure that, again, governance, we are getting fair price for our grain, and we're going to centralize that by having a grain exchange. And then when telephony came in, leaning into the booths and saying, all right, New York, what's this price for there? And then it begins to spread, right? New technologies that allowed that. Down in the pit, saying prices and trading there in that way. That was a new breakthrough at that time. Today, the Minneapolis Grain Exchange building is home to Cocoa Minneapolis, co-working and collaboration. This is the new commodity. The grain exchange has gone away because it's now been electrified, but in fact what we do is this space now hosts a new level of productivity. This happens to be where I had my book launch party. And what we have there in the pit is the 3D rapid prototyping printer I was just talking to you about. That's going to be on your bedside in hotels and probably in your home office in the near future. So things change rather quickly. The commodity, the product here now is community. The community of ideas and entrepreneurs, and what happens within that happens to be mostly software engineers and designers and consultant types, which is how markets are moving now. It's very interesting in that way. So again, if we think back to the idea of having a scenario, something that challenges you to think differently, which is what you have to do as a futurist. This is, again, taken from that event, the MakerBot printer that was there in the middle of the pit, and I just loved that it was, printing out actually little plastic pieces that relate to this starburst pattern that's in the background there and on the cover of my book. So translating it into 3D form right there for people. What does that mean? Here's how you think like a futurist. You begin to ask some questions about, what does this mean for my family? What does it mean for our work life? What does it mean for home life when we introduce this kind of technology? What does it mean for how things are manufactured and produced? What does it mean for retail, for patents and intellectual property? What this single piece of technology does, and the promise of it, is rather disruptive. Because what it does is it says we have the capability, how this plays out is what we have yet to see, but we have the capability to move the locus of both production and consumption to the individual. Yes, we can print out tissues, which is happening in medical labs right now. Yes, we can print out fabric and electronics and photovoltaic cells and plastics and glass. All of those capabilities are already present. So 10 years from now, what does that look like? The MakerBot has its first retail store in New York City. That tells you it's a first glimmer. What do? We duke it out. Certainly merchants and retailers are concerned about it. Innovators and manufacturers are concerned about it. And as we duke it out, we also hear a lot of pundits. I'm beginning to read now people going, oh, pshaw, all this 3D hype. One thing is clear, though, is that whenever a new capability has come to pass, it does get integrated. It's just a matter of when. So it's useful to exercise our imagination around those possibilities. Given your industry, this is just one new disruptive technology. You think, well, what does that mean for me? People I serve, their lives, and so forth. So I thought, I'm not going to have this be a prognostication or give you all kinds of forecasts today, but I do want to just share with you what the beginning of this looks like. There's a lot going on in each one of these force fields, which is one of the reasons why it feels so scary and vital today. We feel like we're on the edge of a cliff, and it's because change is really occurring, as we know, in resources with fuel and with agriculture and water and capabilities of going into space and building hotels on the moon, as well as underwater. That reveals more technologies that then get mainstreamed too. Very important to watch that, even if you can't imagine being there. We see the shift from a mainframe computer into what was just shared at the CES forum in Las Vegas, which is this very cool, slick, pretty watch that does a lot of what your tablet can do right on your wrist. So that's an evolutionary change. We've been seeing things get faster and smaller, but it does make a difference as we start to think about, again, what your business is and how you touch people. The meat jet printer, as we just saw. All kinds of things happening in biotech. In biotech, that means it affects agriculture, it affects the world in which we live. One of the new things that's happening now is carbon engineering around CO2 absorption. That's really big. These are vials that get put into those inkjet printers, food sources, or tissue sources that then can print out your dinner. E-printers and inks, just another thing that's disrupting many industries today. We've got demographics, world population that's going through the roof, mostly because people are living. Healthcare is good. So we have a lot more older people in many parts of the world, whereas we also have a lot more people in the developing world who are surviving childbirth and living on. Demographic pressures changing, and we get a lot of mix. And in the US, we're definitely seeing that as we become I'm not sure what this is supposed to mean, but a majority-minority group. This is what we see, the change here. Industrialized nations, where for many countries are falling below replacement rate, whereas in the developing world, where currently 82% of the world's population lives. Going on into the next 10 years, where we're going to see 86% of the world's population come from there, while we go down. What does that mean in terms about labor? When we talked about needing the demographic balance to keep productive, that's a really big concern. Well, this is interesting. Big cable company is going down the west coast of the continent of Africa, bringing connectivity. Africa is being recolonized by many because it has great resources. Huge resources, of course, in the land, agriculture, and as well as labor. All of this is very disruptive as we look at the connected world. And if we talk about governance, what's beginning to shake loose now after the Arab Spring and otherwise is how do we begin to open source governance? And Finland is one of the first to establish a ministry whereby if you get, I think it's 5,000 people signing your petition, they'll take a look at your proposed bill. Interesting. It's all in flux. That's as much as we're going to do about the grand future. We're going to step now into, so what does that mean for you? How do you even think that through? So 4 forces. The next piece is the human. How do we think that through? And that is what I call the zone of discovery. The zone of discovery, thank you. So much better, and color corrected at that, thank you. So, what changes, sorry, this should be what doesn't change, the human doesn't change. Conditions change by predictable forces. Now we're taking a look at how do we make sense of this? And this is a really, 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 really important point, which is how we perceive and how we predict, how the brain functions, making sense of all that information. And here's what it does. It is built in this way to absorb lots of information about all new experiences, such that when you go into a new place, see a new face, you can readily call from those data banks in your brain and put together a bunch of assumptions to say, oh, I know what entrepreneurs are like. I know what their concerns are. Minneapolis Club, I know that it's going to be kind of oaky. I know what lunchtime events are like. I can fill in all of those blanks to start to create a picture and some assumptions so I can make decisions and keep acting. That is absolutely vital. We would fall down and be like vegetables if we couldn't do that. That is the function of intelligence, how well we can assume what's coming next. But what it means is, here we go, is you can only assume or imagine what you have already experienced. The implications there is that your imagination is locked in. So the wider your experience, the more you have to pull from and can put together in new imaginative and associative ways. And that's critical to finding new opportunities. It is, in fact, how insight is generated in the brain. This is an fMRI of, just came out in 2010, so it's relatively new, where they are now understanding, in fact, that when asked to think about a birthday in the past and then about a future event, that in fact people pulled from the same area of the brain. We predict from memory, right? Which is why when we lose our memory, we become non-functional. Memory is a key piece for being a good futurist. So the material from which we construct, simulate, and elaborate, predict future events is stored in our memory. But that's what we have to work with as the environment around us changes. So the takeaway here, I'm just going to play with you for a moment, is that if you were to think about a 30th birthday or an island vacation, children's literature, science professor, or Bangkok, Thailand, you immediately, I don't know if there's anybody under 30 in the room, there is. Everybody has a picture of what that looks like. And whether you've been to Bangkok or not, or the closest you've gotten is a plate of pad thai, you still have a bunch of assumptions. It demonstrates how our brain fills in all of those gaps so that when we seek to do strategy and innovation, we want to understand the design of that system. And the way to do that is to begin by adding more information. You cannot see the future or are stuck with a problem or an opportunity because you have used up the memory that you have that serves you in that instance. So let me say that again. A problem is simply a situation which you do not yet understand. The assumption of that definition is that if you understand more, you will see a way forward. So all the work that I do is based on that assumption. So you want to build your point of difference and where you begin by learning. Novelty is what creates new insights about your situation so that you can begin to perceive, to penetrate what you were previously stuck with. So that gives neurological basis for what Einstein had famously said, is that we are stuck with problems at the level of thinking that generated them. We need to start with new memories. We need to add new information so that when your brain pulls things up and it brings in new information, it starts to build synapses in a way where it goes, oh, I never saw it that way before. The holy grail of any solution, whether you call it an insight or creativity or just simply problem solving, is re-perceiving. Insight is that moment, and it is a neurological phenomenon that depends on new information coming in. So you always, always, always want to start there. When it does that, you do re-perceive. You now can begin to see new possibilities, and the rest of that then starts to be playing with, now that we can begin to see a new pathway. How do we solve for the conditions in our midst, which are formed by the four forces, by the behaviors that we want to support either within our company and or for our clients and customers? What behaviors are we trying to tick? What is that transformational moment, and what do we now understand about that moment? That's when you zoom in really close and you start to do field studies and ethnographic studies and build from personal experience. And then the big question in strategy is, so if you get that, if you begin to now see a way forward and you have an understanding about what people need, the real question you need to ask yourself is, so what role will we play in that future? What purpose do we have in connecting the needs of people in their new and changing work lives, home lives, family lives, social lives? Where do we come in to help solve that problem, to move them from one point to another such that their lives are better? A word that is used very generally, but the more specific you get about what you mean by that, you get a clear sense of what it is that you'll invent. So that process of studying the four forces, scanning for emerging changes, is a left brain process, right? So we begin, these are our little cuties, our futurists, on the left side of the brain, doing a scan of the four forces to see what's out there that is related to your particular issue or question. You take it into, this is the methodology, the innovation methodology, the zone of discovery, where again, the real goal there is to have an insight around that transformative moment for people, given how conditions are changing, the behaviors you want to affect, and the role that you want to play. You create something, you play with it, prototype it, iterate, and then you finally bring it back into execution mode, which is also left brain. The other piece of brain science that's important is that when the left brain is active, when we use language, when we use numbers, analysis, when we do tasks, what it does is the two hemispheres are truly separated except for a small band of fibers. So it leads and it depresses or suppresses the right brain activity. The same is true when you are really deep in flow and you're in that space where you don't know how to put words to it, but you know you've got something. Right brain proceeds and left brain falls back. That means your process has to really be engineered to support the kind of thinking that you want at the place where it belongs, at the appropriate part in the process. And that's what this is. So left, right, left for any kind of problem solving is really an important thing to keep in mind. You build it in. I build it in a very structured way so that all of this wide-ranging future, all that information, all of that kind of creativity and right brain thinking and field trips and expert panels and artists and all the things that goes in there, how do you bring it back home into those emails and phone calls and meetings that make sure that your work is valuable, that you are building a future and you're not just busy. So it is about going out into right brain territory, being very lateralized so that you can bring in associative information, going back to left brain to edit, right, left, until you finally, guided by a key question, come up with a solution that may not be the end solution because there never is, but enough to keep moving. And moving is important. So we have the first two pieces of understanding how to think like a futurist, understanding how the environment changes with the four forces: resources, technology, demographics, and governance. We understand that insight is key to problem solving, that you have to add new information. You have to have novelty or you will not see it anew. If you want new ideas, you got to get new information, bottom line. And then you have to move it through in a process that goes left brain, right brain, left brain. And now comes the hard part. It's kind of easy, but it doesn't happen very often. And that is, how do you keep this going in your lives and your business when everything else crowds it out and when it feels like an extra? And despite all of the energy and passion and exhortation to be creative and collaborate and be a design thinker and all of those things, when are you going to fit it in? It most often doesn't stick. And I know in my work that I see companies spend millions upon millions of dollars every 18 months or so, bringing in a new group to teach them how to bring this home, and it doesn't stick. And the reason is because it's not a part of the system. I think to be effective in business, you have to respect the design of business. You can't try to change it. All of these mavericks who want to change it and all of that doesn't really happen. What you do want to do is to make sure that you are paying attention to the four forces so that whatever it is that you are spending all of your time doing every day has resilience as so much change comes towards you, that it has relevance based on those behaviors, that you investigated. And of course, that it has a really strong business model around it so that you get revenue and reward. That all has to be part of the design, very, very explicitly so. So the 5% rule, it comes out of my work in designing innovation programs to bring this home to make sure it sticks. And that is to say, rather than all of the beautiful work that a